thank you so much for joining us today. You know, our guests today say that their world was turned upside down when their children were accused of a brutal crime. I want you to take a look at this.
It was an early Sunday morning when James and Marianne Stevens were heading back to their motel room, when suddenly a young African-American man ran up to Marianne, shot her at close range, and ran off with her purse. A few hours later, police picked up Brenton Butler, who was identified as the shooter by James Stevens. Investigators claimed Brenton confessed to the crime, and with an eyewitness to the shooting, it should have been an open and shut case. It wasn't.
Should have been an open and shut case. Well, please welcome Melissa and Andre to the show. Absolutely crazy when we say it should have been an open and shut case. There is an elderly couple leaving a hotel. The elderly couple walks out on the street. A young man walks up to them, point-blank range, fires, shoots the wife, kills her on the spot, grabs her purse, takes off, and goes running. The elderly man is standing there as the only eyewitness. He sees the person that did this. 20 minutes later, police bring back to the scene, I'm going to tell this, bring back to the scene of the crime a young man that they picked up off the street. They brought that man back to the scene of the crime, had him in a car, and this man looked in that window and said, "That's the man who did this." And that man was your son.
That is correct.
So, Melissa, where was your son that morning?
Home in bed.
Home in bed?
Yes.
At the time that this happened?
Yes.
Well,
okay, this is what happened. That morning when I got up, it was early that Sunday morning. I checked Brenton and Brandon's room. They both were in bed. I could see Brandon from walking out of my door. Brent was still in bed at that time. He was still at home.
Still at home. But then Brent did leave out and go out a little later on in the morning, did he not?
Yes, it did.
Where did he go? Did you know he had left out to go?
At that time, I didn't.
Okay. But we find out that he had gone where?
He was in transit to Blockbuster at that time to get a job application.
To get a job application.
That is correct.
But the police found him relatively close to the scene, is that right?
Yes.
And they brought him back to the scene, and this man identified him, right?
The man did. He was in transit, too. The route that he actually took, he had to pass the hotel where the crime scene was. But he was quite a distance from the crime scene. Mm-hmm. And so he had, at that point in time, the police officer saw him, and because the MO that they had was basically just a young black male.
They took your son downtown?
They did.
Your son was 15 years old?
Yes.
At the time?
Yes.
So now, doesn't a 15-year-old, when you take him in the custody, aren't they supposed to call the parent?
Yes, they're supposed to, but what had happened, we was at home at the time, and we was preparing to go to church. Mm-hmm. And as we were walking out the door, then two officers approached us, and they identified themselves. And I said, "Yes, how can I help you?" And at that point in time, they indicated that there were some burglaries in the neighborhood, and my son's name, Brenton's name, came up. Mm-hmm. And that's all they indicated. So he said, "Is Brenton here?"
But wait, he said, "Is Brenton here?" You said?
No, he isn't.
Okay. But at this point in time, when the police showed up at your front door, they already had your son in custody.
That is correct.
So they could have pulled up at the door and said, "We have a minor who is your son in custody right now." But they didn't say that to you.
They did not.
They left after asking you questions about a little robbery in town, right?
That is correct. They indicated, what time were you, after telling them we was going to church, and he said, "About what time do you expect to be back?" I said, "Well, we'll be back first Sunday about 1:30. So he said, "Okay, we'll be back at 1:30. Do you expect your son to be home by then?" I said, "Of course, he better be at that time."
They already knew the answer to that question. He wasn't going to be home because he was in their custody.
That is correct.
Okay, so 1:30, you come back from church? Did the police call you and say, "We have your 15-year-old son down here at the precinct"?
No, actually, Melissa became very, very agitated at church, and after maybe about 11:45, she had a niece really just take her home. And when she got home, she was very, very upset. And then she called the church and got me. So I left church service, and I came home as well. Because we had told Brandon, our youngest son, when Brent gets back home, just call us on the cellular telephone to let us know that he has arrived. That call never came.
The whole day goes by. The two of you are worried. Where is our son?
That's right.
No phone call.
No
Now,
phone call.
unbeknownst to them, I'll fill in some blanks. Brenton is down at the police precinct. They've accused him of first-degree murder. He says, what are you talking about? I know what you're talking about. They try to get him to confess. He doesn't know what he's talking about. They bring in a police officer who then beats him. This boy is punched, is beaten, knocked to the floor, told that unless you confess, we're going to do something to your family, all because it's a crime to be a young black man in America. I'm going to take a break and we'll fill in the blanks. When we come back, we'll be back right after this. You as a jury member, when they first gave you this case, you heard the evidence that they had. What did you think when you first heard about this?
First heard it during jury selection. I thought that he was guilty. I said, that's it. He's guilty, and that's it.
Patrick, be ready. I'm going to pick you up. We're going down to the police department. You're being accused of kidnapping and raping.
Leading a double life? If so, call us at 1-800-MONTEL-2. That's 1-800-MONTEL-2.
This young man had, I'm going to fill in the blanks, had nothing to do with this crime. Even if they claim they didn't know that, but they had to have a confession. They threatened a 15-year-old child, did not call his parents and say that he was arrested, did not call and say that you have a right to an attorney, nothing. What did the 15-year-old boy do? Somebody say it, yell it out. What did he do? He confessed. He signed a statement that was written out by the cops, the same cops that had beat him. You could have called the next morning, told what? Your son has been arrested for? No. I'm sorry.
That night.
That night, because you called to try to put in a missing person report.
I placed the missing persons report approximately around 9-ish time frame, and because you were always told that, hey, you have to have 24 hours before you call in missing person report. That's what we're led to believe anyway. And so, but there's such an anxiety level being so high, and Brent has never gone off at any point in time and stayed, a significant time frame with us now not knowing where he's at. But 9 o'clock, I just caved in flat and contacted the police, and they sent an officer out approximately 30 minutes later, two partners, and 10 o'clock, that's when we received a call from the police department stating that they had him in custody, and he has been charged for armed robbery and murder.
First-degree murder.
Yes.
Now, you would think, oh, there's a big mistake here, right, Melissa? Mistake. They'll know it's a mistake. Tomorrow, Brent will be home, right?
Correct.
Tomorrow, Brent didn't come home.
Nope.
He didn't come home the next tomorrow.
No, I didn't.
Or the next tomorrow. They kept Brent in jail for 6 months, correct?
6.5 months.
6.5 months until his trial started. And Melissa, I have to ask you, you knew your son was innocent.
Yes.
The two of you raised this boy. You know he didn't have that in him to commit murder and kill someone.
Correct.
That's correct.
During this period of time, the strain took its toll on you, huh, Ma?
Yes, it did.
You want me to tell you? You had a stroke?
Really a brain aneurysm.
Brain aneurysm, which we know is brought on by stress. Okay? So now they have a child in that they know they shouldn't have in, and they have been looking at their own evidence at this point in time and recognize they have no evidence. They have nothing other than one eyewitness. They have no fingerprints, nothing that can tie yourself to the scene. But all they do is abuse his family. So you ended up having to go and have surgery for your aneurysm.
Yes.
And Brent knew that.
Yes. I spoke with Brent on the day I actually went into the hospital. I was going out the door. I told him to just hold on and pray, and I'll be fine.
And, Mom, you made it back. But
Yes.
that's for the grace of God.
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So let's jump forward just a little bit, and we'll get to what ended up being true. They took your son to trial.
Yes, they did.
And at the time, you had a public defender, did you not?
Yes, we did.
Because you couldn't afford a big type of a lawyer.
Yes, because we attempted to really get a lawyer, and matter of fact, we had the attorney meet us at the hearing the very next morning. We just knew we was going to have a bail, that we wouldn't have any money to really post bail, so we just stepped out on faith to assume that actually we'd just take the public defender. And I had spoken with another church member that's an attorney, and she said, well, after I gave the public defender's name, she said, your blessing has started to happen already. He's an excellent attorney. And so I said, well, we have enough money to mortgage the house, whatever we need to do to really post bail. So that was the logic for really going that particular route.
But they didn't set bail.
They didn't set
Denied bail.
Crushing.
So now you have a 15-year-old who's in a prison being tried as an adult.
Right.
In an adult jail.
Yes.
For a crime he did not commit.
That's right.
I'm going to talk to him. We're going to talk some more when we take a break. Please welcome Brenton to the show. How are you, sir? Have a seat. Let me take a little break. Let me take a little break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about what happened that day. We'll be back right after this.
I asked the doctor, I said, when do I get to take my grandson home? He said, you don't. I wouldn't give him to a child abuser like you. And I said, I didn't abuse my grandson.
Patrick, be ready. I'm going to pick you up. We're going down to the police department. You're being accused of kidnapping and raping.